Sarah Martinez wiped the grease from her hands as she finished installing the new transmission in the armored vehicle. The desert heat in Afghanistan was unbearable, even at 7 in the morning. She had been working since 5, making sure every piece of equipment was perfect before the team headed out on their mission. At 26, Sarah was the youngest mechanic on the base, but she was also the best. She could fix anything with wheels, tracks, or rotors. The Navy SEALs trusted her completely with their lives, knowing that when she worked on their vehicles, they would never break down in the field. "Martinez, how's that Humvee looking?" called out Lieutenant Commander Jake Thompson, the team leader. He was tall, muscular, with sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. Sarah had been working with his team for 8 months now, and they had become like family to her. "She's purring like a kitten, sir," Sarah replied, closing the hood with a satisfying clunk. "New transmission, fresh oil, and I reinforced the armor plating on the passenger side. You're good to go." The mission was supposed to be routine. Intelligence had located a high-value target in a village 30 miles north of the base. The plan was simple: get in, capture the target, and get out before sunrise. Sarah watched as the 8-man SEAL team loaded their gear into 2 vehicles. "You know the drill, Martinez," said Petty Officer First Class Mike Rodriguez, the team's demolitions expert. "If we're not back by noon, start worrying." He grinned, but Sarah could see the tension in his eyes. This was his 4th deployment, and he knew better than anyone that simple missions had a way of going sideways fast. Sarah had wanted to be a soldier once. She had grown up in a military family in Texas, where her father had served 3 tours in Iraq, but an injury during basic training had ended those dreams, leaving her with a permanent limp in her left leg. Instead of giving up, she had channeled her determination into becoming the best mechanic the military had ever seen. As the convoy pulled out of the base, Sarah felt the familiar knot in her stomach. She always worried when the teams went out, but something about this mission felt different. The intelligence was too clean, too perfect. In her experience, when things seemed too good to be true in Afghanistan, they usually were. The radio crackled to life around 10 in the morning. "Base, this is Alpha Team. We've reached the target location. Beginning approach now." Thompson's voice was calm and professional, but Sarah could hear the underlying tension. She continued her work, servicing the other vehicles in the motor pool. Her hands moved automatically, checking fluid levels and inspecting parts, but her mind was focused on the radio. The base was unusually quiet, with most of the personnel either on patrol or catching up on sleep. At 11:30, the radio came alive again, but this time the transmission was broken and filled with static. "Base, this is heavy contact. Need immediate extraction." The voice was barely recognizable, distorted by interference and the sound of gunfire in the background. Colonel Marcus Webb, the base commander, rushed into the communications center. Sarah followed, her heart racing. She had never heard panic in Thompson's voice before, and the sound chilled her to the bone. "Alpha Team, this is base. Please repeat your last transmission," the radio operator called out. There was no response, just the static of an open channel and the distant sound of automatic weapons fire. Sarah's mind raced as she listened to the broken communications. She knew those men better than anyone. Thompson was like a big brother to her. Rodriguez had shown her pictures of his newborn daughter just last week. Petty Officer Williams always brought her coffee when she worked late shifts. The rescue teams were already being assembled, but Sarah knew they would take at least 2 hours to reach the target location. In a firefight like the one she was hearing over the radio, 2 hours might as well be 2 days. Colonel Webb was shouting orders, coordinating with higher command, trying to get air support diverted to help the trapped SEAL team, but Sarah could see the frustration in his eyes. The nearest Apache helicopters were dealing with another crisis 100 miles away. The quick reaction force was pinned down by an IED attack on the main road. As she stood in the communications center, listening to her friends fight for their lives, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She looked at the vehicles in the motor pool, mentally calculating distances and fuel loads. The colonel was focused on his radio, trying desperately to reach anyone who could help. Sarah slipped out of the communications center and headed toward the armory. Her limp was more pronounced when she was stressed, but she ignored the pain shooting up her leg. She had spent countless hours on this base, knew every building and every security protocol. The armory sergeant was busy coordinating with the rescue teams, and Sarah walked past him without question. Everyone knew her, trusted her. She had access to most areas of the base because of her work maintaining the vehicles. She grabbed an M4 carbine and several magazines of ammunition. Her hands shook slightly as she loaded the weapon. It had been over 5 years since she had fired a rifle, not since her abbreviated time in basic training. But muscle memory kicked in, and she found herself checking the weapon with practiced efficiency. The sound of helicopters overhead gave her hope for a moment, but she quickly realized they were medical evacuation birds, not attack aircraft. They were preparing for casualties, which meant the situation was getting worse. Sarah limped toward the motor pool, her mind made up. She couldn't sit in the communications center and listen to her friends die, while bureaucrats and commanders argued about protocols and chain of command. These men had trusted her to keep their equipment running, and now she was going to trust that equipment to bring them home. Sarah climbed into the fastest vehicle she had, a modified Humvee that she had been working on for weeks. It was designed for reconnaissance missions, lighter than the standard armored vehicles but equipped with a powerful engine and advanced communication systems. She had installed every upgrade herself, knowing the machine better than its original designers. The vehicle started on the first try, the engine purring with the precision that only came from meticulous maintenance. Sarah adjusted the rear-view mirror and saw the base shrinking behind her as she accelerated toward the main gate. "Martinez, where are you going?" The guard at the gate recognized her but looked confused. It was unusual for mechanics to leave the base alone, especially during an active mission. "Emergency maintenance on Alpha Team's position," she lied smoothly. "Colonel Webb's orders." The guard hesitated for a moment, then waved her through. Sarah's reputation and access had bought her the precious seconds she needed. As soon as she cleared the gate, Sarah pushed the accelerator to the floor. The Humvee responded immediately, kicking up a cloud of dust as it raced across the desert terrain. She had memorized the route to the target location weeks ago, when she had first heard about the mission during planning sessions. The radio chatter grew more desperate as she drove. She could hear Thompson's voice, strained and urgent, calling for medical assistance. Rodriguez was coordinating defensive positions, his usual joking demeanor replaced by grim professionalism. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Sarah's mind flashed back to her childhood, watching her father clean his service rifle at the kitchen table. He had taught her to shoot when she was 12, emphasizing that a weapon was only as good as the person using it. "Accuracy beats firepower every time, sweetheart," he had said. "One well-placed shot is worth 100 wild ones." The terrain was rough, but the modified Humvee handled it easily. Sarah had spent months fine-tuning the suspension and drivetrain for exactly this kind of punishment. Every bolt, every component had been tested and retested until she was satisfied with its performance. 20 minutes into her drive, the radio went silent. The absence of chatter was more terrifying than the sounds of battle had been. Sarah pressed harder on the accelerator, knowing that silence usually meant one of two things. Either the team had won decisively, or they were all dead. She crested a ridge and saw the target village spread out below her. Smoke was rising from several buildings, and she could see muzzle flashes from multiple positions. The 2 SEAL vehicles were positioned behind a low wall, surrounded by at least 50 hostile fighters who had them pinned down from 3 sides. Sarah grabbed her binoculars and studied the tactical situation. The SEALs were trapped in what military strategists called a kill box, with enemies positioned on the rooftops and in alleyways, creating overlapping fields of fire. Any attempt to move would result in immediate exposure to multiple shooters. She could see bodies scattered around the courtyard, but couldn't tell if they were friendlies or enemies. Her heart pounded as she searched for any sign of movement from the SEAL position. Finally, she spotted Rodriguez's distinctive red bandana behind the wall, and relief flooded through her. The enemy fighters were so focused on their trapped prey that they hadn't noticed Sarah's arrival. She was positioned about 800 meters away, with a clear view of their positions. The range was extreme for the M4 carbine she carried, but not impossible for a skilled marksman. Sarah thought about her options. She could try to radio for help, but the nearest friendly forces were still over an hour away. She could attempt to create a distraction to draw some of the enemy fire away from the SEALs, or she could do what her father had trained her to do, take precise, calculated shots at maximum range. She set up her position carefully, using the Humvee's hood as a shooting rest. The weapon felt familiar in her hands despite the years that had passed since her last training session. She adjusted the sights for the distance and wind conditions, remembering lessons from countless hours on the firing range. Her first target was a sniper positioned on a rooftop directly across from the trapped SEALs. He was the most immediate threat, with a clear line of sight to their position. Sarah controlled her breathing, letting her heart rate slow as she found her natural point of aim. The shot cracked across the desert, and the enemy sniper tumbled from the rooftop. Immediately, several other fighters turned toward her position, trying to identify this new threat. Sarah was already moving, repositioning behind the vehicle's engine block for better protection. Her second shot dropped a machine gunner who had been raking the SEAL position with sustained fire. The sudden silence from that weapon allowed Thompson's team to shift positions slightly, giving them better cover and angles of fire. Sarah worked methodically, picking her targets based on threat priority. The enemy fighters were skilled and well-equipped, but they had made the mistake of assuming they faced only the 8 trapped Americans. They had spread their forces to maintain the encirclement, leaving individuals exposed to long-range fire. Her fourth shot struck an enemy commander who was trying to coordinate an assault on the SEAL position. She could see the confusion spreading through the hostile ranks as their leadership structure began to collapse under her precise fire. The enemy fighters started to panic as they realized they were being engaged from an unexpected direction. Some broke from their positions to seek better cover, while others tried to return fire at Sarah's location. Their shots were wild and inaccurate at the extreme range, kicking up dirt dozens of yards away from her position. Sarah's training from her father kicked in completely now. She was no longer the base mechanic with a limp and grease under her fingernails. She was a precision instrument, calculating wind speed, distance, and target movement with mechanical efficiency. Her fifth shot silenced another machine gun position. Her sixth dropped a fighter who was trying to flank the SEALs from the left side. Each shot was deliberate, aimed, and effective. She was making every bullet count, just as her father had taught her. The enemy fighters began to realize that their attack was falling apart. Sarah watched through her scope as several groups tried to retreat from their positions, but she was ready for them. Her seventh shot caught a fighter trying to escape across an open courtyard. Her eighth dropped another who was attempting to reach a vehicle parked behind one of the buildings. From her elevated position, Sarah could see the entire battlefield like a chessboard. The enemy had made the tactical error of committing all their forces to the initial attack, leaving themselves no reserves to deal with an unexpected threat from their flank. Now they were paying the price for that overconfidence. Sarah's radio crackled to life. It was Thompson's voice, strained but clear. "Unknown shooter, this is Alpha Team Leader. Identify yourself." She could hear the confusion in his voice. The SEALs knew that no friendly sniper teams were supposed to be in the area. "Alpha Team, this is Martinez," she replied, chambering another round. "I'm here to bring you home." There was a moment of stunned silence on the radio. Then Rodriguez's voice came through, filled with disbelief and relief. "Martinez? What the hell are you doing out here?" "My job," Sarah replied simply, then focused her attention back on the battlefield. A group of enemy fighters was trying to organize a coordinated retreat, moving from building to building in a tactical formation. She adjusted her aim and fired again, disrupting their movement and forcing them back into cover. The psychological impact of her intervention was becoming clear. The enemy fighters had expected to overwhelm 8 trapped Americans, but now they were facing accurate fire from multiple directions. Their advantage in numbers was meaningless if they couldn't coordinate their attacks. Sarah noticed movement in a building that had appeared empty. 3 enemy fighters were trying to set up a mortar position that would allow them to attack the SEALs with indirect fire. She shifted her position slightly and fired through an open window, neutralizing the mortar team before they could get their weapon operational. Her ammunition was running low, but the tide of the battle was clearly turning. The enemy fighters who remained were more focused on survival than attack. Several had already abandoned their weapons and were fleeing toward the hills beyond the village. Thompson's team began to take advantage of the confusion in the enemy ranks. Sarah watched as the SEALs moved with their characteristic precision, advancing from cover to cover, and systematically clearing the buildings around their position. Years of training and combat experience showed in every movement. Sarah provided overwatch for their advance, scanning for any remaining threats. Her 12th shot dropped a sniper who had been waiting in ambush as the SEALs cleared a building. Her 13th caught a fighter who was trying to circle around behind Thompson's position. The battle was effectively over, but Sarah maintained her vigilance. In her experience, wounded enemies were often the most dangerous, and she kept her rifle ready as the SEALs continued their methodical advance through the village. Rodriguez's voice came over the radio again, this time with a note of professional admiration. "Martinez, I count at least 15 confirmed kills from your position. Where did you learn to shoot like that?" "My father taught me," Sarah replied, scanning the battlefield for any remaining movement. "He always said that if you're going to do something, you might as well do it right." The SEALs had reached her position now, and she could see Thompson jogging up the hill toward her Humvee. His face was a mixture of relief, gratitude, and professional respect that she had never seen before. Behind him, the rest of the team was securing the battlefield and tending to their wounded. "Martinez, I don't know what to say," Thompson began as he reached her position. "You saved our lives out there. All of our lives." Sarah was reloading her rifle, muscle memory taking over even as the adrenaline began to fade. Her hands were steadier than she had expected, and she realized that she felt more calm and focused than she had in years. The mechanical precision required for long-range shooting had felt natural, almost comfortable. "How did you know we were in trouble?" asked Petty Officer Williams, the team's medic. He was treating a minor shrapnel wound on his arm, but his eyes were bright with curiosity and respect. "I heard the radio chatter," Sarah explained. "It was clear that the rescue teams weren't going to make it in time, so I decided to improvise." She gestured toward the modified Humvee. "I figured this vehicle could get here fast enough to make a difference." Thompson was studying the battlefield below through his own binoculars. "You had perfect positioning up here. How did you know to take the high ground?" "Same reason I know how to fix engines," Sarah replied with a slight smile. "You study the system, figure out how all the parts work together, then find the weak points." She pointed toward the village. "They had you surrounded, but they made the mistake of thinking they only had to worry about 8 targets. They forgot about the possibility of external intervention." The team medic was checking Sarah for injuries, a standard procedure after any combat engagement. He seemed surprised to find that she was completely unharmed, not even a scratch from flying debris or ricochets. "Martinez," Thompson said, his voice serious now, "what you did out here. This goes way beyond mechanical skills. This was professional-level tactical shooting under combat conditions." He paused, studying her face. "You said your father taught you to shoot. What was his background?" Sarah felt a familiar pain in her chest when she thought about her father. "Master Sergeant David Martinez, Army Rangers. 3 tours in Iraq, 2 in Afghanistan. He was killed by an IED during his final deployment, 6 months before I enlisted." The revelation hung in the air for a moment. Thompson nodded slowly, understanding beginning to dawn in his eyes. "And you were going to follow in his footsteps until you got injured in basic training." "The doctor said I'd never pass the physical requirements for combat arms," Sarah said, unconsciously favoring her left leg. "So I became a mechanic instead. Figured if I couldn't carry a rifle in combat, at least I could make sure the people who did had equipment they could rely on." Thompson looked down at the battlefield where bodies of enemy fighters were scattered across the village. The tactical situation had completely reversed in less than 30 minutes, thanks to one woman with a rifle and the courage to use it when it mattered most. "Martinez, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest," Thompson said. "How many enemy fighters do you think you engaged today?" Sarah considered the question carefully. She had been keeping count automatically, a habit her father had drilled into her during training sessions. "I fired 27 rounds and had 23 confirmed hits. Some of the fighters I wounded may have survived, but they're no longer combat effective." Rodriguez whistled low as he joined the conversation. 23 confirmed hits out of 27 shots at ranges between 600 and 800 meters, under combat stress, with iron sights. He shook his head in amazement. "That's better accuracy than most trained snipers achieve under ideal conditions." The team was gathering around Sarah now, their expressions ranging from admiration to disbelief. These were men who had seen extraordinary acts of courage and skill throughout their careers. But what Sarah had accomplished was beyond their experience. Williams, the medic, was looking at Sarah with new eyes. "You know what this means, don't you? The enemy had at least 50 fighters in that village when the attack started. We accounted for maybe a dozen of them before you arrived. You personally eliminated nearly half of the total enemy force." Sarah felt uncomfortable with the attention and praise. In her mind, she had simply done what needed to be done to help her friends. The technical aspects of the shooting had felt natural, almost automatic, but the weight of what she had accomplished was beginning to sink in. "We need to get back to base," Thompson said, checking his watch. "The brass is going to want a full debrief on this operation, and I suspect Martinez is going to be answering a lot of questions." The ride back to base was quiet. Sarah drove her modified Humvee while the SEALs followed in their two vehicles. Her mind kept replaying the events of the morning, trying to process what had happened. 3 hours ago, she had been a mechanic. Now she was a combat veteran with more confirmed kills than some soldiers achieved in entire deployments. As they approached the base, Sarah could see unusual activity around the command center. News of the mission's outcome had obviously reached the leadership, and there were more senior officers present than she had ever seen in one place. Colonel Webb was waiting for them at the motor pool, along with several other officers Sarah didn't recognize. Their uniforms indicated they were from higher headquarters, possibly even Pentagon-level staff. The presence of so many senior leaders meant that this incident was being taken very seriously. "Martinez, I need you to secure your weapon and report to the command center immediately," Colonel Webb said as soon as she stepped out of her vehicle. His tone was professional but not unfriendly. "There are some people who want to speak with you about today's events." Sarah felt nervous for the first time since the morning's action. Facing enemy fighters had felt natural, but dealing with military bureaucracy and senior officers was outside her comfort zone. She secured her rifle and followed the colonel toward the command center, her limp more pronounced due to fatigue and stress. The command center had been transformed into a formal briefing room. A large map of the operational area was displayed on the wall, with detailed tactical overlays showing the positions of friendly and enemy forces during the engagement. Sarah could see her own position marked on the map, with red X marks indicating where each of her shots had found their targets. "Sergeant Martinez," said a one-star general whose name tape read, "Harrison, I want you to walk us through exactly what happened this morning, from the moment you decided to leave the base until you returned." Sarah took a deep breath and began her account. She described hearing the distress call, making the decision to intervene, and the tactical considerations that had guided her actions during the engagement. The officers listened without interruption, occasionally making notes or asking for clarification on specific technical details. "You mentioned that your father trained you in marksmanship," General Harrison said when she finished her account. "Can you describe the extent of that training?" "My father believed that every soldier should be proficient with their weapon," Sarah replied. "From the time I was 12 until I enlisted, we spent at least 4 hours every weekend at the rifle range. He taught me to shoot at various distances and under different conditions. He said that accuracy was more important than speed, and that every shot should have a purpose." "And you maintained those skills after your injury ended your combat training?" asked another officer. "I practiced occasionally, but not regularly," Sarah admitted. "I focused more on my technical training as a mechanic. I thought my shooting days were behind me." The officers exchanged glances. Sarah could sense that something significant was being discussed, but she wasn't sure what it meant for her future. The military had strict protocols for dealing with personnel who exceeded their assigned roles, and she worried that she might face disciplinary action for leaving the base without authorization. Colonel Webb stood up and addressed the room. "Gentlemen, based on the preliminary investigation and the testimony we've heard today, it's clear that Sergeant Martinez's actions saved the lives of 8 Navy SEALs and prevented a significant tactical defeat. Her technical skills as a mechanic are already well documented, but today she demonstrated exceptional abilities as a precision marksman under combat conditions." General Harrison nodded and turned back to Sarah. "Sergeant Martinez, what you accomplished today was extraordinary by any standard. Your initiative, courage, and tactical skill prevented what could have been a catastrophic loss of personnel and equipment. The question now is what we do with this information." The room fell silent as General Harrison's words hung in the air. Sarah could feel the weight of their stares, but she kept her expression neutral and professional. Her father had taught her that in the military, sometimes the most important skill was knowing when to speak and when to listen. "Sir, I just did what needed to be done," Sarah finally replied. "Those men are my friends, my teammates. I couldn't sit on base and listen to them die when I had the skills and equipment to help." That's exactly the kind of initiative we look for in our special operations personnel, said a Navy captain whose presence had puzzled Sarah earlier. Now she understood. He was likely from Naval Special Warfare Command, the organization that oversaw SEAL operations. Colonel Webb cleared his throat. Martinez, there's something you need to understand about the bigger picture here. The enemy force you engaged today wasn't just a random group of insurgents. Intelligence confirms they were a highly trained unit that had been planning this ambush for weeks. They had detailed knowledge of our patrol schedules and standard operating procedures. The implications of this information hit Sarah immediately. You're saying we had a security breach, sir? Exactly. This was a sophisticated trap designed to eliminate one of our most effective SEAL teams, General Harrison confirmed. What should have been a catastrophic loss for our forces instead became a decisive tactical victory, thanks to your intervention. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the significance of what she was hearing. Her split-second decision to help her friends had apparently disrupted a major enemy operation and potentially saved countless future lives by eliminating a well-trained hostile unit. The enemy fighters you neutralized included several high-value targets that we've been tracking for months, the Navy captain added. Among them was a bomb maker responsible for at least a dozen IED attacks on coalition forces. Your actions eliminated threats that might have taken months of operations to address through conventional means. Thompson, who had been quietly observing the briefing, stepped forward. Sir, if I may add something, Martinez didn't just save our lives through random luck or beginner's fortune. Her tactical decisions were textbook perfect. She chose the optimal firing position, prioritized targets based on threat assessment, and maintained fire discipline throughout the engagement. Rodriguez nodded in agreement. The way she coordinated with our movement during the battle showed an understanding of small unit tactics that you don't learn from books. She was thinking 3 steps ahead, anticipating our needs and providing support exactly where and when we needed it. General Harrison studied Sarah's file, which had apparently been pulled and reviewed during the debriefing. Your mechanical skills are rated as exceptional, your leadership potential is noted as high, and now we have documented proof of elite-level marksmanship under combat conditions. The question is whether you're interested in expanding your role beyond vehicle maintenance. Sarah's heart began racing. She had dreamed of being a combat soldier since childhood, but had accepted that her injury made that impossible. Now it seemed the door might be opening again in a way she had never imagined. What exactly are you suggesting, sir? She asked carefully. The Navy captain leaned forward. The SEAL community is always looking for qualified personnel who can provide specialized support to our operations. Your combination of technical skills and demonstrated combat effectiveness makes you an ideal candidate for our support programs. But sir, my medical profile, Sarah began, gesturing toward her left leg. The doctor said I'd never pass the physical requirements for special operations. Medical standards can be waived for personnel with exceptional qualifications, General Harrison replied. Your performance today demonstrates that your injury doesn't significantly impact your operational effectiveness. What matters is results, and your results speak for themselves. Sarah felt as though she were in a dream. 6 months ago, she had been struggling with depression and a sense that her military career was limited to turning wrenches and changing oil. Now senior officers were discussing the possibility of her joining the most elite units in the military. I need to be honest with you about something, she said after a moment. When I made the decision to leave base this morning, I wasn't thinking about regulations or chain of command. I was thinking about saving my friends. If that's going to be a problem for future assignments, you should know that I'll make the same choice again. The officers exchanged glances, and Sarah thought she detected hints of smiles on several faces. Colonel Webb actually chuckled softly. Martinez, that's exactly the kind of thinking we want in special operations, the Navy captain said. The ability to make correct tactical decisions under pressure, regardless of bureaucratic constraints, is one of the most valuable qualities a special operator can possess. General Harrison closed Sarah's file and looked directly at her. I'm going to make you an offer, Sergeant Martinez. We're prepared to recommend you for advanced training programs that would utilize both your technical expertise and your demonstrated combat skills. The training would be intensive and demanding, but it would open doors to assignments that most soldiers only dream about. Sarah's mind raced as she considered the implications. Advanced training would mean leaving the familiar world of the motor pool and entering the unknown realm of special operations. It would mean pushing her physical and mental limits in ways she hadn't experienced since her injury ended her initial military dreams. "What kind of timeline are we talking about, sir?" she asked. "If you accept, you'd begin preliminary training within 30 days, the Navy captain replied. The full program would take approximately 18 months, including advanced marksmanship training, small unit tactics, technical specialization, and integration with SEAL teams. Thompson stepped forward again. "Sir, if I may make a request. When Martinez completes her training, I'd like her assigned to my team permanently. Today proved that she's already integrated with our operations, and frankly, I can't imagine working with anyone else watching our backs." The room was quiet for a moment as Sarah processed everything she had heard. This was the opportunity she had thought was lost forever when she was injured in basic training. Her father had always told her that sometimes life gives you unexpected chances to prove yourself, and the key is being ready to seize them when they come. "Sir, I accept," Sarah said firmly. "When do I start?" 18 months later, Sarah Martinez stood on the deck of a Navy destroyer in the Persian Gulf, adjusting the scope on her custom-built sniper rifle. The weapon was a far cry from the standard M4 carbine she had used during that desperate morning in Afghanistan. This rifle had been built specifically for her, incorporating lessons learned from dozens of missions and hundreds of hours of advanced training. Her uniform bore new insignia now, the trident pin of Naval Special Warfare and the chevrons of a staff sergeant. The limp that had once threatened to end her military career was barely noticeable, strengthened by months of intensive physical therapy and conditioning. More importantly, it had never once compromised her performance during operations. Thompson approached from across the deck, his own equipment gleaming in the pre-dawn light. His team had evolved as well, incorporating new tactics and procedures based on their experiences working with Sarah over the past year. What had begun as a desperate rescue had transformed into the most effective SEAL team in the theater. "Martinez, intelligence confirms the target is in the building," Thompson said, handing her a tablet with satellite imagery. "Third floor, northwest corner room. Range is approximately 1,000 meters from your position on the adjacent building." Sarah studied the imagery with the analytical eye she had developed during her advanced training. The target was a high-value terrorist leader who had been planning a series of attacks on civilian targets. Traditional assault methods would have resulted in significant collateral damage and civilian casualties. A precision shot would eliminate the threat while minimizing risk to innocents. "Wind is variable between 5 and 8 knots from the southwest," she observed, checking her environmental sensors. "I'll need to account for approximately 2 inches of drift at that range." The mission was representative of how Sarah's role had evolved. She was no longer just a mechanic who could shoot accurately. She had become a precision weapons specialist, capable of eliminating targets at extreme ranges under challenging conditions. Her technical background gave her an advantage in understanding ballistics and environmental factors that many traditional snipers lacked. Rodriguez, now serving as her spotter, was setting up his equipment beside her. The partnership had developed naturally over their months of training and operations together. His experience with explosives complemented her precision shooting, creating a team that could handle a wide variety of tactical situations. "Target acquired," Rodriguez reported through his spotting scope. "Confirm identity based on facial recognition software." Sarah adjusted her position slightly, finding her natural point of aim. The breathing techniques and mental discipline she had learned during advanced training allowed her to enter the focused state that elite snipers called the zone. In this state, external distractions faded away, and her entire world narrowed to the relationship between her rifle, the target, and the environmental factors affecting the shot. Her radio earpiece crackled with Thompson's voice. "All stations, this is Alpha Leader. Mission is cleared hot. Martinez, you are authorized to engage when ready." Sarah controlled her breathing, allowing her heart rate to slow and her body to find perfect stillness. The skills her father had taught her on a Texas shooting range had been refined and enhanced by the best instructors in the military, but the fundamental principles remained the same: patience, precision, and purpose. The shot broke cleanly, the rifle's recoil absorbed by her practiced stance and the weapon's advanced recoil system. Through her scope, Sarah watched the target drop immediately, confirming a successful hit at extreme range under challenging conditions. Target eliminated, Rodriguez reported professionally. Clean hit, no collateral damage observed. The mission was over in seconds, but Sarah knew it represented months of planning, intelligence gathering, and careful positioning. This was what modern warfare looked like when executed by elite professionals. Surgical precision instead of overwhelming force, minimal collateral damage, and decisive results. As they packed their equipment, Thompson joined them on the rooftop. Outstanding work, both of you. Intelligence estimates that eliminating this target will prevent at least 3 planned terrorist attacks against civilian targets. Sarah secured her rifle in its protective case, the familiar ritual marking the end of another successful mission. Each operation had built upon the last, creating a record of achievement that exceeded even her own expectations. What had started as a desperate attempt to save her friends had evolved into a new career that combined her mechanical expertise with elite combat skills. Martinez, "We've got new orders coming in," Thompson said, checking his encrypted communication device. "Looks like Command wants us back at headquarters for mission planning. There's apparently a situation developing that requires our specific skill set." Sarah nodded, feeling the satisfaction that came from a job well done. The terrorist leader they had eliminated today would never harm innocent civilians, and the precision of the operation meant that no bystanders had been endangered. This was the kind of work that made all the training and sacrifice worthwhile. As they prepared to leave the operational area, Sarah reflected on how much her life had changed since that morning in Afghanistan. The shy mechanic who had worried about fitting in with the combat units had become a confident special operations professional, respected by her peers and trusted with the most challenging missions. Her father would have been proud, she knew. The skills he had taught her during weekend shooting sessions had become the foundation for a career he could never have imagined. More importantly, she had found a way to honor his memory while serving her country in a capacity that utilized all of her abilities. The helicopter ride back to base gave Sarah time to think about her future. She had proven herself capable of operating at the highest levels of military service, but she also understood that her journey was just beginning. Each mission brought new challenges and opportunities to grow, both as a soldier and as a person. Rodriguez interrupted her thoughts, pointing toward the horizon where the sun was beginning to rise. "Another beautiful morning in paradise," he joked, but Sarah could hear the satisfaction in his voice. Like her, he had found his calling in this demanding but rewarding work. "You know what I realized today?" Sarah said as they watched the landscape pass below them. "That morning when I drove out to save you guys, I thought I was just doing my job as a mechanic. But I was really beginning my job as something else entirely." Thompson overheard her comment and smiled. "Martinez, I think your father would say that you've been doing your real job all along. You've just finally found the right tools for it." As their helicopter approached the base, Sarah could see the familiar buildings and structures that had been her home for the past 2 years. But now she viewed them from a different perspective. Not as a support person watching the warriors depart, but as a warrior herself, returning from another successful mission. The base personnel who greeted them at the landing pad treated Sarah with the same respect they showed to Thompson and the other team members. Her transformation from mechanic to special operator was complete, accepted by everyone who worked with her. She had earned her place through performance, not politics or favoritism. In the debriefing room, senior officers praised the team's performance and discussed how their success would influence future operations. Sarah contributed to the tactical discussion with confidence, her insights valued equally with those of her teammates. The young woman who had once felt intimidated by military bureaucracy now navigated it with ease. As the formal debriefing concluded, Sarah gathered her equipment and prepared to return to her quarters. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to serve. But tonight she could rest with the satisfaction of another mission accomplished. Walking across the base in the evening light, Sarah passed the motor pool where she had once spent her days maintaining vehicles. A young mechanic was working late, probably preparing equipment for an upcoming mission. Sarah paused for a moment, remembering how that work had felt like her entire world. Now she understood that mechanical skills, marksmanship, and tactical expertise were all just different tools for the same fundamental job, taking care of the people who depended on you. Whether that meant ensuring their vehicles wouldn't break down in combat, or providing precision fire support when they were in trouble. The underlying mission remained the same. Sarah Martinez had started as just the team's mechanic, but when the SEALs got caught in an impossible situation, she had become exactly what they needed her to be. In the process, she had discovered that sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to accept the limitations others place on you, and instead define yourself by what you're willing to do when it matters most.